Part 1. To me, Demons of the Lemegeton. The golems which heeded Momonga's command were made of rare metals. They moved before him with an agility that belied their heavy bodies, then took the ready stance they had assumed earlier. Now that Momonga had decided to go with his theory that virtual reality had become reality, his first concern was to guarantee his own safety. Although the NPCs he had met so far had readily obeyed him, there was no guarantee that the others he met would react in the same way. Also, even if they were all friendly, he did not know when danger would next appear. Momonga's life and death hinged on whether or not he could use such things as Nazarik's facilities, the golems, his items, his magic, and so on. Well, that's one problem solved, Momonga muttered to himself in relief as he looked at the golems. He then ordered them only to listen to him. That way, even in the worst-case scenario, if one or more NPCs revolted, he would have an ace in the hole. Momonga, satisfied with the mighty-looking golems, looked down at his bony hands. He wore 9 rings on his 10 fingers, and only his left ring finger was bare. Usually in Yggdrasil, one could only wear 2 rings, one on each hand. However, Momonga had used permanent cash items, which were very expensive, to let him wear a full 10 rings, one on each finger, and use all their powers at once. This was not unique to Momonga. Most players who valued power would spend that money too. One of the 9 rings Momonga wore had an emblem on it which resembled the symbol embroidered upon the large red banner behind the throne. That ring was called the Ring of Ainz. Every member of Ainz possessed the magic ring that Momonga wore on his right ring finger. Although he could use the power of 10 rings at once with the aid of cash items, when he applied the cash item, he had to decide which ring he wanted to assign to which finger, and that decision was irrevocable. Even so, Momonga had removed the ring on his left ring finger and sent it to the treasury. The reason why Momonga had assigned that somewhat weaker ring to that finger was because it would be very useful under certain circumstances, but he rarely wore it because it had a constant effect. The power of the Ring of Ainz was unlimited teleportation between named rooms of the great underground tomb of Nazarik, and it would even allow one to teleport into the tomb from the outside. Since Nazarik was warded to block teleportation into or within itself, except for a few specific areas, this ring was very handy. The only places where this ring could not teleport its wearer was to the throne room and the various guild members' personal rooms. This ring was also required to enter the treasury, which was why he could not do without it. Momonga sighed deeply. After this, he would be using the ring's power. He was not sure if the ring could still do everything he expected of it, but he had no choice except to test it out. As he unleashed the ring's power, the world before him instantly turned black. Right after that, the scenery in front of him changed, and his surroundings were now a dark tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, he could see what looked like a giant lowered portcullis. Within the tunnel were artificial lights. It worked. Momonga muttered to himself, relieved at the successful teleport. He walked down the wide and high passage, toward the portcullis ahead of him. The stone floor amplified the sound of Momonga's footsteps, and at times he could hear echoes. The torches that lined the tunnel flickered constantly, and as a result, the shadows they made seemed to dance. Bathed in the light of several torches, he cast several shadows at once, and it seemed as though there were multiple Momongas. What passed for his nose should have been little more than an empty hole in his skull, yet still he smelled something as he drew near the portcullis. Momonga stopped and took a deep breath. It was a strong scent of earth and grass, the smell of the jungle. Much like his encounter with Albedo just now, the intensely realistic scent, in a world that should not have possessed such things, only convinced Momonga of the reality of the world he was in. But how did his body breathe, without lungs or a windpipe? Momonga felt that thinking too much about such things was foolish, and put it aside. As though it sensed Momonga approaching, the portcullis swiftly raised itself into the ceiling at just the right moment to let him through. Past the barrier, what Momonga saw was a circular arena, surrounded on all sides by many tiers of audience seats. The Colosseum was an oval in shape, 180 meters on its long axis and 150 meters on the short axis. It was 40 meters tall and modeled after the arenas of the Roman Empire. There were continual light spells cast everywhere, illuminating the grounds in white light, so one could observe the entire Colosseum like it was day. The audience was composed of many clay dolls, golems, in other words, which showed no sign of activity. In this Colosseum, the intruders would be the stars of the show, while the ones watching from the VIP box would be members of Ainz. The main event, of course, would be a brutal melee. Apart from the 1,500-man invasion, every single invader had met their end here. Momonga walked into the center of the arena, and looked into the heavens. Before him stretched a black expanse of night sky. Perhaps he might have been able to see the stars if there were no light around him. However, this place was the 6th floor of the great underground tomb of Nazareth, so the sky here was merely a virtual imitation. Even that imitation required a massive amount of data, but as a result the sky here could change with the time of day, even showing an actual sun with appropriate daylight effects. Momonga could relax himself in this virtual landscape because Momonga's heart was still human, as opposed to his skeletal appearance. It was also because he felt a sense of appreciation for his comrades' hard work in building this place. Part of him wanted to just wait and space out here, but the present situation denied him that luxury. Momonga looked around, nobody was there. The twins should have been taking care of this place. He noticed something. Too. After the shout, a figure leapt from the VIP box. The figure jumped down from a height of about 6 stories, somersaulted in midair, and landed as though it were a butterfly descending on a flower. There was no magic involved, only pure physical prowess. It negated the force of the impact with a simple flexing of the knees, and it smiled broadly. Victory! It made a V sign of victory. A child of about 11 had descended from above. Her face bore a smile that was as bright as the sun. She was adorable, with the androgynous appeal of both a boy and a girl. Her hair resembled threads of spun gold, and it grazed her shoulders. The light reflected off the strands of hair resembled an angel's halo. Her mismatched eyes, one blue, one red, seemed as eager and sparkly as a puppy's. Her ears were long, and his skin was dark. She was a dark elf, a species related to forest elves. She wore a shirt of light leather armor, reinforced with red dragon scales. The emblem of Ainz was proudly displayed on her vest, stitched in gold onto a white background. Below that, she wore a pair of white pants, matching her vest. A necklace with a glittering golden acorn pendant hung from her neck, and she wore a pair of gloves reinforced with plates of enchanted metal. A whip coiled across her waist and right shoulder, and there was a longbow on her back. The bowstave and grip seemed to be covered in strange decorations. Aura, is it? Momonga spoke the name of the dark elf child. He was addressing the guardian of the 6th floor of the great underground tomb of Nazareth, Mare Bello Fiore. She was a skirmisher who was also able to summon and tame beasts. Aura jogged over to Momonga. Well, to her, it was a jogging pace, but she was traveling as fast as one of her beasts at full speed, rapidly closing the distance between them. Aura screeched to a halt. Her running shoes had hurricane metal plates on the soles, and they threw up clouds of dust as they ground against the floor of the arena. The clouds did not touch Momonga's body. If she had planned that, then his skills must have been impressive indeed. Phew. Aura was not sweating, but yet she wiped her forehead theatrically. Then, with a puppy-like smile, she greeted Momonga. Welcome, Momonga-sama. Welcome to the level I guard. The greeting was filled with the same respect that Albedo, Sabas, and the maids had for him, but for some reason it felt more intimate. To Momonga, this intimacy allowed him to loosen up. Being too uptight and scary was quite troublesome for Momonga, who was not experienced with this sort of thing. He could not detect any hostility on Aura's face, and his enemy scan revealed nothing. Momonga's line of sight left the band on his right wrist, and he loosened his grip on the staff of Ainz. He had planned to strike hard and fade away if an emergency occurred, but it seemed as though there would be no need for that. I'll be intruding for a while. What are you saying? You are the master of Nazarick, the supreme overlord, right, Momonga-sama? There's no place you'd be intruding if you visited. I see. Speaking of which, if you're here, Mare. Upon hearing Momonga's question, Aura blinked in surprise, as though she had realized some great truth and turned around, shouting loudly upward. Momonga-sama has graced us with his presence. How rude are you going to be by not showing your face to him? There was movement in the shadows of the VIP box. Was Mare there too? Yes, that's right, Momonga-sama. He's really timid. Oi, jump down here now. An almost inaudible reply came from the VIP box. Judging by the distance between there and here, it was a miracle the other party could even hear Aura. However, that miracle was the result of the magic on Aura's necklace. I can't, One-chan. Aura took a deep breath and grabbed her head. Momonga-sama, he's just scared, he's definitely not trying to insult you. As a member of society, one had to know when to speak one's heart and when to say things that were appropriate for the occasion. Momonga nodded and answered in a gentle way to put Aura at ease. Of course, Aura. I have never doubted your loyalty. Aura sighed in relief, and then she became serious again before shouting angrily at the VIP box. The Supreme Being Ainz-sama has come to visit us, but you as a floor guardian aren't even here to meet him. You should know how disrespectful that is. If you're too scared to jump down, maybe a quick kick will substitute for courage. You. I'll take the stairs down. How long do you want Ainz-sama to wait? Get over here now. I got it, Mare had gathered up his courage, but his voice still seemed unsteady. After that, a figure jumped out of the VIP box. As expected, it was a dark elf. This dark elf was particularly wobbly on his feet, completely different from how Aura had handled her landing. However, he did not seem to be hurt. He must have skillfully dissipated the force of landing with some athletic trick. After that, he immediately began running over as quickly as he could. However, his top speed was still much slower than Aura. She must have thought so too, because she frowned and shouted. Hurry up. Yes. The child who finally arrived in front of Ainz looked almost identical to Aura. They had to be twins, given the way they shared the same hair, the same eyes, and the same features. However, if Aura was the sun, then Mare was the moon. He looked nervous, as though he was afraid of being scolded. Momonga was surprised by the stark difference between the two. However, from what Momonga knew, Mare should not have been like this. Even if one wrote a long character description for their NPCs, it would not be reflected in their personalities. Yet, these two dark elf children were displaying animated emotions in front of Momonga. They must be the Aura and Mare that Bukabukagama-san wanted to see. Bukabukagama was the guild member who had designed these two dark elf characters. If only she could have been here for this. I'm sorry, I kept you waiting, Momonga-sama. He nervously raised his eyes to peek at Momonga. He wore a vest of blue dragon scales, and a small cape that was as green as jungle leaves. His clothes had the same basic white color as Aura, but a short section of flesh peeked out below his short skirt. It was short because the rest of his legs were covered in white silk stockings. He had an acorn-shaped pendant on a necklace like Aura, but his was made of silver. Mare was much more lightly armed than Aura, with a pair of lustrous white gloves on his dainty little hands, and a gnarled black staff in his hands. Mare Bello Fiore. Like Aura, he was a guardian of the 6th floor of the great underground tomb of Nazarick. Momonga squinted, though his eyes were merely empty sockets, and looked at them. Aura thrust her chest forward proudly, while Mare simply cowered under Momonga's gaze. He nodded several times, musing that the two of them were indeed the incarnation of his comrade's hard work. I'm glad to see that the two of you are in good spirits. I'm positively overflowing with energy, although it's been a bit boring recently. It would be nice if we had an intruder or two. I would rather not have to meet intruders, they're scary. After hearing Mare's words, Aura's expression changed. Ha! Momonga-sama, please excuse me for a while. Mare, come with me. Oh ow. Nei-chan, that hurts. After seeing Momonga nod slightly, Aura pinched Mare by the tip of one of his ears and dragged him away from Momonga. Then, she began whispering into Mare's ear. Even from a distance, one could tell that she was scolding him. Intruders, huh? Well, much like you, I don't want to meet them either, Mare. At least, I'd rather meet them after having the chance to make all the preparations I need, Momonga thought as he watched the twin guardians from afar. After he snapped back to reality, Momonga realized that Mare was on his knees in front of Aura, who was hurling a torrent of abuse at him. Momonga smiled, as the scene reminded him of the brother and sister who were his friends. Good grief, Mare was clearly not made by Perorancino-san. Or is this because Bukubukagama-san believed that little brothers should listen to their big sisters? Though come to think about it, Aura and Mare should have died once. How should I address that? The invasion of 1,500 people had made it down to the 8th floor. Which was to say, Aura and Mare should have died then. Did they remember anything about it? What meaning did the concept of death have for those two, anyway? According to Yggdrasil's rules, death would cost a character 5 levels and force him to drop one of his equipped items. In other words, characters below level 5 would immediately disappear. Players were specially exempt from this and would not vanish, but they would be reduced to the minimum level of 1. Therefore, it must be an issue with the game rules. Using spells like Resurrection or Raise Dead would mitigate this level loss. In addition, with the use of cash items, one would only lose a bit of experience. It was simpler for NPCs. As long as the guild paid the requisite fees to resurrect them, they would be recalled to life without any ill effects. Therefore, players who wanted to respec their characters often favored using death to lower one's levels. While the loss of even a single level is a harsh punishment in a game where each level required a lot of experience points, losing levels was not such a frightening prospect in Yggdrasil. This was because the game company wanted its players to explore previously undiscovered regions and find new things, instead of hunkering down in familiar territory because they were afraid of losing levels. With all this in mind, were the two people who perished in the wake of the 1,500-man invasion the same after their resurrection? Momonga wanted to verify this, but at the same time, he did not want to disturb them unduly. For all he knew, that large invasion might have been a traumatic experience for Aura. Momonga felt it would be unwise to question her in that manner when she had showed no overt signs of hostility. The important thing was that they were lovingly crafted NPCs of his friends in Ainz Ooal. Perhaps after settling all the accumulated problems, he would ask her about it. In addition, the concept of death in-game might be different from outside it. Of course, if one died in reality, that was the end of everything, however, that might not be the case right now. He wanted to perform an experiment on this, but first he needed to collect information and establish his priorities. Thus, putting this matter aside would be a wise decision. After all, Momonga still had many doubts about how the Yggdrasil he knew had changed. Aura was still scolding Mare as Momonga stood in contemplation. Momonga pitied Mare a little. After all, he had not said anything that warranted such wrathful castigation. In the past, when brother and sister argued, all Momonga could do was watch. But now, things were different. That should be enough, don't you think? Momonga-sama. But as a guardian, Mare. It's fine. Aura, I understand how you feel. It is only natural that you would feel unhappy if Mare, as a floor guardian, said such a cowardly thing, especially if it were in my presence. However, I believe that if anyone invaded the great underground tomb of Nazarick, you and Mare would fearlessly step forward to engage them. There is no need for scoldings, as long as one does what is required of them when the time comes. Momonga walked up to between the two of them and helped Mare up. And Mare, you should be grateful to your kind sister. Even if I were angry, I could not remain, so after seeing how your sister scolded you. Mare looked in surprise at his sister. At this moment, Aura hurriedly said, No, it's not like that. I wasn't scolding him to show off in front of you, Momonga-sama. Aura, it's fine. It doesn't matter what you had in mind. I understand your kind intentions. However, I must tell you that I am not dissatisfied with Mare's performance as a guardian. Yes. Thank you, Momonga-sama. Thank you very much. Momonga felt uncomfortable as he watched the two of them bow to him. He felt particularly ill at ease as he saw them look at him with their shining eyes. In order to camouflage the embarrassment he felt at being looked at that way, Momonga coughed. That's right. Aura, I think you said something about being bored because there were no intruders? No, about that. After seeing Aura's fearful reaction, Momonga felt bad about asking his question. I do not intend to reproach you for your answer, so feel free to speak your mind. Yes, a little. There's nobody around here who can spar with me for more than 5 minutes. Aura touched her index fingers together before looking up hopefully to Momonga. As a guardian, Aura was level 100. There were precious few opponents in this dungeon which could rival her. There were 9 such NPCs, including Aura and Mare, as well as one other. What if Mare was your opponent? Mare's body trembled as he shrank away. He shook his head with moist eyes, and he looked very afraid. Aura sighed as she saw the way he looked. As Aura sighed, a sweet scent filled the surrounding air. Unlike the fragrance albedo radiated, this scent seemed somewhat persistent. As he remembered Aura's ability, Momonga took a step away from the scent. Sorry, Momonga-sama. As Aura noticed Momonga's strange reaction, she hurriedly dispersed the scent with her hand. Among Aura's skills as a beast tamer, there were certain passive skills that had buffing and debuffing effects. These abilities acted through her breath and had a radius of several meters, some even up to 10 meters. With the effect of certain skills, that radius could be enlarged to unbelievable proportions. In Yggdrasil, icons representing buffs and debuffs appeared in one's field of vision, so one could see if they were under the effect of an ability. However, no indication of these changes appeared before him, which made things quite troublesome. It should be fine now, I cancelled it. Is that so? Although you're undead, so mind-affecting effects shouldn't work on you, right, Momonga-sama? That was true in Yggdrasil. The undead were immune to mind-affecting effects, whether positive or negative. Was I within the effective radius? Aura lowered her head in fear, and so did Mare beside her. I am not angry, Aura, Momonga said in as gentle a voice as he could manage. Aura. You don't have to be so afraid. Do you think such a simple skill would inconvenience me? I was simply asking if I was within the effective range of your skill. Yes. Just now, you were within range of my skill. After hearing Aura's energetic answer, as relief flooded back into her, Momonga realized that his very presence filled Aura with fear. Once he noticed this, he felt a clenching pain in his non-existent stomach. What if he became weaker from this? Every time he thought about that, he tried desperately to put it out of mind. And what was its effect? The effect just now should have been fear. He did not feel afraid. In Yggdrasil, one would not be affected by attacks from the guild or party to which one belonged. Although, there was a very real chance this rule no longer applies, so it would be best to verify that now. Aura, I was just thinking that your skill should not have an effect on people from the same guild, the same group. Aura's eyes went wide, much like Mare's did from the side. Judging from their reactions, Momonga realized that they did not agree with him. Am I mistaken? Yes. Could it be you mixed it up with the ability to freely change the range of one's skills? So it seemed the rule disabling friendly fire was no longer in effect. Mare was not affected while being near Aura, but that might be because he had equipped an item which negated mind-affecting effects on himself. In contrast, the undead Momonga's divine class items did not have any data which protected against mind-affecting effects. But in that case, why did Momonga not feel fear? There were two possibilities. He might have resisted it with his base stats, or resisted it with his immunities from being an undead creature. Because he was not sure which hypothesis was correct, Momonga decided to conduct an experiment. Can you try using other effects? Aura tilted her head and made a strange noise of bafflement. Momonga was reminded of a puppy, and he reached out to stroke Aura's head. Her hair and scalp felt smooth as silk, and caressing her was very comfortable. Because Aura did not seem to mind, Momonga wanted to keep going on. However, Mare looked a little frightened as he stared at them from the side, so he paused. What was Mare thinking, anyway? After thinking for a short while, Momonga released his staff and ruffled Mare's hair with his other hand. The quality of Mare's hair felt better, but Momonga hardly paid it any heed as he rubbed their heads until he was satisfied. Then, he remembered what he was here to do. Then, I have something to ask of you. I plan to conduct certain experiments. I'll need your help for them. At first, the two of them did not know how to respond to that. However, when Momonga's hand left their heads, the two of them had embarrassed yet happy looks on their faces. Aura cheerfully replied, Yes, I understand. Momonga-sama, leave it to me. Momonga reached out a hand to quell Aura. Before that, Momonga gripped the floating staff in his hand. Just like before, when he used the power of the ring, he focused on the staff. Among the many powers it possessed, Momonga concentrated on one of the gems which decorated the staff. It was a divine class item called the Gem of the Moon, and the ability Momonga chose called forth Moonlight Wolves. As the summoning magic took effect, 3 beasts appeared out of thin air. The special effects of the summoning were the same as in Yggdrasil, so Momonga was not surprised by them. Moonlight wolves looked very similar to Siberian wolves, but they radiated a silver glow. Momonga could feel a mysterious connection between himself and the moonlight wolves. It clearly showed who was the master and the servant between them. Are those moonlight wolves? Aura's tone showed she did not understand. After all, she had no idea why Momonga would summon such weak monsters. Moonlight wolves were highly agile and they were useful for ambushes, but they were only level 20 or so. They were very weak monsters compared to Aura and Momonga. However, monsters of this level were enough for their purposes this time round. In fact, the weaker they were, the better. Yes, they are. Now, include me in the radius of your skill. Really? It's fine. Momonga's insistence was so great that even the dubious Aura went ahead with it. Given that they were no longer in the game, there was a possibility he could not ignore, which was that Aura's skill might not have activated properly. In order to rule that out, he had to expose himself to the skill with a third party, which was why he had summoned the Moonlight Wolves. After that, Aura exhaled several times, but Momonga did not feel affected in any way. He tried relaxing or turning around in the middle of the skill, but he felt nothing strange. However, the Moonlight Wolf behind him was affected. Thus, he concluded that Aura's skill had taken effect. From this experiment, Momonga learned that mind-affecting effects did not work on him. This meant, in the game, demi-human and heteromorphic races unlocked racial skills when they reached certain levels. An overlord like Momonga had the following skills. Create high-tier undead 4 times per day. Create mid-tier undead 12 times per day. Create low-tier undead 20 times per day. Negative energy touch, despair aura V, instant death, negative protection, dark soul, black halo, undead blessing, unholy protection, wisdom of darkness, speak evil tongues, ability damage 4, piercing damage resistance V, slashing damage resistance V, turn resistance 3, high-tier physical immunity 3, high-tier magic immunity 3, cold, acid, and electrical immunity, as well as arcane vision / C invisibility. And then there were the abilities from his class levels, instant death magic enhancement, rite of darkness, undead aura, undead creation, undead control, undead strengthening, and so on. Then there were the basic special qualities, which all undead possessed. Immunity to critical hits, mind affecting, poison, disease, sleep, paralysis, death, and energy drain effects. Resistance to necromancy and biological penalties. Undead did not need to breathe, eat, or drink. They were healed by negative energy and had dark vision. Of course, they had weaknesses too, like good, light, and holy vulnerability 4, bludgeoning vulnerability V, vulnerability to holy and good consecrated areas 2, double damage from fire, and so on. This meant that Momonga could be sure that he still possessed the basic abilities of an undead being and his special skills gained through leveling up. I see. Well, this was an informative experiment, thank you, Aura. Are you all right? Yes, I'm fine. Is that so? Return. The 3 moonlight wolves vanished as though time itself had turned backward for them. Momonga-sama, did you come to our floor in order to perform those experiments just now? Mare was nodding beside her. No. In truth, I came here for training. Training? For you, Momonga-sama. Aura and Mare's eyes were so wide it seemed like they might fall out of their sockets. Their surprise was only natural. After all, who would expect to hear such a thing from Momonga, a powerful magic caster, the supreme ruler of the great underground tomb of Nazarick, as well as the one who stood above all? Momonga, who had anticipated this reaction, swiftly replied. Indeed. After seeing Momonga's swift reply and hearing the light impact of his staff on the ground, realization dawned on Aura's face. Momonga was quite pleased with himself, as this reaction had fallen within his scope of prediction. Is that the legendary weapon of the highest order which only you may wield, Momonga-sama? Legendary weapon? What did he mean by that? Momonga had his doubts, but after seeing Mare's shining eyes, he knew the question had not been asked with ill intentions. Indeed, this is the staff of Ainz, which I made with my guild members. Momonga raised the staff, and it immediately radiated a beautiful glow which lit up its surroundings. The glow was as blinding as the staff itself. However, the surroundings were filled with inauspicious flickering shadows, which emitted an aura of menace. Momonga's voice was more animated and proud when he spoke. The 7 gems in the staff's snake mouths are all divine class artifacts. Since they all belong to a set, having them together unlocks even greater power beyond their base abilities. Gathering them all required an incalculable amount of time and effort, and many of our members stated that they wanted to quit during the process. I can't remember how many monsters we farmed for their drops. Anyway, in addition, the staff's power is beyond that of a divine class item. In fact, it almost approaches that of a world-class item. Its most potent feature is its automatic engagement system, cough, cough. It would seem he had gotten carried away. He had built it with his comrades in the past, but because he had never taken it out before, there had been no chance for it to shine. Now that he had the chance to show it off, his praise surged forth like a rising tide. Momonga forcibly quelled his desire to flaunt the staff. How embarrassing. Something like that. That's amazing. That's totally awesome, Momonga-sama. Momonga almost laughed as he saw their eyes. He tried his best to suppress the delighted expression on his face, although skeletons had no expressions, and continued. which was why I wanted to run some experiments with this staff. I hope you can help me. Yes. Understood. We'll go prepare right away. Then, could we see the power of the staff? That's fine. Then, I shall show you a fraction of the power of this mighty staff, which only I can wield. Awesome, Aura exclaimed as she jumped up and down adorably. Mare was hard-pressed to hide his delight, as could be seen from the twitching tips of his ears. Ah, this is bad, I can't let my stern facade slip because of this. Momonga tried to regain his dignity as he reminded himself thusly. And there is one more thing, Aura. I have already ordered the other guardians here. They will arrive within the hour. Then we need to get ready for. No, there is no need. All you need to do is stay here and wait for them. Is that so? All the guardians, that means Shaltir's coming too. All the guardians. Ha! Aura's long ears suddenly drooped. However, Mare's reaction was not as exaggerated as Aura's. According to her backstory, Aura was designed to have a poor relationship with Shaltir, but that was probably not the case for Mare. What would happen next? Momonga sighed quietly.